to escape,
Sure.
the noise and things like that. So we're really looking forward to, something that's a plan that's more sustainable. I participated just for a few minutes last month, and I heard some commentary about the modernization of, this waste management plan, the 2.0 plan. And I think that, is really needed for this community. I mean, some of the processes, the machinery in and of itself, is really outdated. I mean, one of the processes is like the staff, they have to literally bang the levers against the machine in order to dislodge the trash from, the system. And it causes a lot of noise and a lot of noise in the mornings, particularly, at 6 a.m. So, I'm speaking informally, on behalf, this is all informal sort of commentary I received from the neighbors. I've been living in this community for about 10 plus years. So, you get a good sense of what people, feel happy about and what people are dissatisfied about. So this is just, another call to action from you all or for you all, so that you can sort of take note that this is continuing, and it's really been disruptive and it's not safe. So with all those, things combined, we're hoping to get a expedited resolution. Thank you again.
Sure, thank you.
So much. Chair, that concludes our public comments portion, and we may now proceed with the regular calendar. The first order of business is which to adopt the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, March 31st, 2021. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Alice? Do I second?
Second.
Second, could you say that again?
Second, Adams. Can you hear me?
Thank you, Member Adams.
Yep.
Yes, all in favor, please?
Aye.
None opposed. Thank you very much. We'll now proceed to the reports item on the agenda. Chair, would you like to provide any comments or remarks before we begin the formal reports?
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. I would. So to my fellow board members, we are entering an era where NYCHA is going to go through a significant amount of change. We're going to talk about the transformation plan update. We're also going to update you on section 3, both things that are going on now and things that are proposed. And rather than take our meeting all at once, we're going to try to work in some additional report non-voting meetings like this one on a regular basis. This way, we think, 1, we can do a public process. 2, we can keep the board members informed of the changes, because some of the things that we're going to test and try, it'll be very important that we are kind of all aware that we're making these efforts. And third, it means then when we have the regular meeting, we can just focus on the agenda items and kind of knock those out and handle our sort of business transaction part of the meeting. So we wanted to try this meeting today to begin this process of publicly advising the board of the various things that the agency is going to undergo. Now, other topics that are going to be coming up, we'll probably have updates on our initiatives under the blueprint. We'll have updates under compliance related to the HUD agreement. And if there are topics that the board, other board members wish to have us focus on at one of these meetings, please let me know or the staff know, and then we can work in the reports. We're thinking quarterly to start, so we'd only add 1 extra meeting each quarter, but that this would be a chance to do a deeper dive, questions and answers, in a public process. There'll be other things coming up, I can guarantee, where there's a lot of activity, but we really want to be able to talk to you, all of you, and update you on the organizational changes that we're going to have to undergo, starting in the adoption of the new bylaws and the new organizational structure, which is going to change NYCHA very dramatically. And I want the board to feel a part of that. And I want the board members to feel you are really making this possible. The power to make these changes is vested with this group. And I think that's important to recognize. And we want to make sure that beyond the agenda of items and the change orders that we're approving, that you have a sense of how the organization is beginning to meet its mandate under the HUD agreement, as well as meet the mandate to change and provide better services. So I'll stop there, and then we could go into the first report if there's no questions.
Thank you, Chair. The
Greg,
first-
Greg.
Yes, Joe. Yes,
So this
Joe.
is like a preamble to what we'll probably be doing later to get more explanation and groundwork into what's, what we're going to be doing. Is that
Correct.
what I?
Yeah.
And the things that we're going to be addressing later, this is just a dress rehearsal.
Yeah. Well, one way to think about it is we're going to lay out today, the plan is a reorganization of NYCHA, the reorganization part. So there's a set of working groups that include our staff, led by our staff, but it includes the monitor, the Southern District, HUD, and residents. And I think some of these things are so important, like revamping the alternative work schedule and other initiatives that would have an impact on the properties.
Excuse me, Chair. Excuse me, can everyone put their microphones on silent, mute unless you're speaking? So only right now the chair's microphone should be unmuted, please.
Thank you. So Joe, we're going to have this chance because some of the reports would be specific, say, to one of the pilot projects that we're trying, and get a chance to give the board a sense of what we've learned from that. In the coming months, for example, we'll be completing our negotiations on the memorandum of understanding with the CCOP. We'll be entering into a new project labor agreement. We'll be looking towards the next round of compliance activities and investments in compliance. And I think it's important that at some point we do a little bit deeper dive than, say, maybe just approving an agenda item for somebody or a contract that we're using to support us. So this is a chance to really see and have an exchange on some of the things that are going to be, we hope, changing how we do business and changing our customer service and changing how we relate at the property level.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. Before we move on to the first report, I'd like to remind everyone to silence all cell phones and to mute all microphones/speakers. Thank you. The first report is an update on the transformation plan, and it's being co-presented by Eva Trimble and Arvind Shahoni. Eva?
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, board members and the public. We're excited today to bring you an update of all of our transformation plan work. Next slide. I wanted to take a few steps back just to make sure everyone remembers the genesis of all this work, and to kind of take you back through the last almost year and a half of the work that we've been doing. Obviously, this work stems from the HUD agreement, which required that we have a collaboration with the federal monitor to prepare an organizational plan. And the organizational plan is designed to achieve the deliverables of the HUD agreement, the obligations of the HUD agreement, by really rethinking all of our operations. And so starting about a year and a half ago, we created a planning process to engage residents, employees, and other stakeholders in really mapping out this long-term vision for NYCHA's operations. Next slide. This organizational planning effort really grew, and as it grew, we realized it was truly a transformation of NYCHA. And so we started labeling it the transformation plan that you've been hearing about. And the transformation plan proposes organizational changes, business process changes, and cultural changes for NYCHA's staff. And all of that combined, we believe, will really transform how we deliver services to our residents. We were excited to release the transformation plan on March 8th, but we realized that that is definitely not the stop of our work. In fact, it's really just the beginning of our work. We've working closely with the Federal Monitor, HUD, and the Southern District, came up with a plan to deliver an implementation plan in supplement to the transformation plan. So as we kind of call it now, that the organizational plan is really the combination of these two. The transformation plan represents an unconstrained vision for what NYCHA wants to achieve, but we are all very cognizant of the fact that we do have pretty big limitations. And those limitations aren't just on funding and staffing, but our ability to change altogether, right? There's only so much we can change at once. And so we have to really think about phasing of these initiatives, planning them out. And when we come to that, we realize that we're looking at, a multi-year implementation process. And we want to be transparent with all of our stakeholders about what they can expect the changes to be and when they can expect them to happen. So the implementation plan, the first phase, is expected to be released the end of September, and we would do a follow-up at the end of June 2022 to continue to lay out the timing and expectations of all of these strategies in the transformation plan. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we spent a lot of time focusing on the engagement with our stakeholders. And that was because we really wanted this plan to be driven by our residents and our employees. And we wanted to be able to hear what people working and living with NYCHA every day are feeling. We wanted this to be driven from the ground up, about starting at the properties and how we can improve direct service delivery to our residents. And so we had a series of meetings over the course of many months, and even pivoted that during COVID. On the next slide, we can talk more about that. So for example, starting this summer, we did a very large survey. We had one of our best responses with over 6,000 residents responding. And this was both about transformation plan ideas, but also about issues affected by COVID, including work orders and units. We held multiple town halls over the course of the summer to hear more from residents, especially as we had started to release some information about the transformation plan. We wanted to hear back from residents. And then for the first time ever, NYCHA released a strategic planning document for public comment. It was out for about 6 weeks during the fall. And we had over 300 comments during that public comment period that really helped us rethink the transformation plan in some critical areas. Next slide. Some of the things that we heard were somewhat surprising, to be honest. We knew that repairs and maintenance would be high on the list of obvious comments. But some of the things that surprised us were about resident accountability. And we heard this also in town halls about the ways residents used to interact with NYCHA and ideas for that going forward. We also heard a lot about safety and security, which we know is an ongoing issue, but we hadn't really had anything in the transformation plan about it. So this really was a helpful process for us to think through what the transformation plan should focus on. And on the next slide, I can show you how we adapted the plan from the draft to the final to incorporate these comments. So these were some of the examples of things that we changed in the final document that was released on March 8th. We included a chapter on safety and security, highlighting the work we're doing right now on lighting and CCT cameras, as well as our partnership with the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice on important community policing work. And there's definitely more we can do here, but we wanted to at least reflect the current initiatives underway. We also created a commitment to do an end-to-end process review on work tickets that are closed without any work performed. We heard this over and over again, especially in the town halls, about residents not being informed that their work tickets were closed. So we're getting ready to work with a partner to analyze that process with a specific focus on the resident engagement touch points. We understand there are sometimes good reasons for closing work tickets, but we want to make sure that we are always closing the loop with the residents and they always understand why that is happening. Go back to the next slide. There we go. The last 2 points I want to mention is we also heard a lot about the transfer process, that people don't always understand the waiting time for a transfer of a unit, and that often can take many, many months. And so we want to think about how we can be more transparent about the timing when somebody is initially requesting a transfer so that they can plan appropriately for that timing. And last piece, which I think Arvind will talk about later, but we want to create a resident roundtable. So when I mentioned about resident accountability and working better with residents, we want to actually bring residents into this implementation process to help us co-design how these strategies will work. And so we're about to launch, hopefully next week, a resident roundtable to initiate this process. Next slide.
Could I ask a question, Eva?
Sure.
It's actually something you and I have talked about, and that is whether we'll be doing this kind of survey annually so that we can assess the changes as we're moving forward.
Yes, the survey of the residents we expect to do annually. It will obviously change. We won't have some of the COVID aspects of it, but it's absolutely something we want to be doing more of. But we also want to hear from the resident roundtable about their ideas. One of the areas that we hope that they would focus on is feedback, because we want to make sure that we are appropriately reaching out to residents. We hear sometimes that we do too many surveys. There have been surveys about heat. There's going to be surveys about AWS. There was this general survey. So sometimes there's too much communication and sometimes there's not enough communication. We hear both positives and negatives when it comes to the amount of robocalls that we're doing. So one of the areas that we want the resident roundtable to help advise us on is actually how to improve communication with residents, both through surveys, robocalls, and other means and methods.
Super. That's great. Thank you.
Eva?
Yes.
With the resident roundtable, when you refer to residents, and one of my major pet peeves regarding that is the residents that now went from Section 9 to Section 8, and so to speak, from lack of a better phrase, the watchdog watching this conversion go from NYCHA to the Section 8 program. There's been some scuttlebutt about some of the difficulties and information that either was not passed on or was lost in the communication. So I'm hoping that whatever this panel looks like, it includes some of the people that have converted and the problems that they're experiencing.
Absolutely. I can tell you the general manager beat you to that punch already. And when we were reviewing this with him, already made that recommendation that we include some residents from the RAD Impact portfolio. And I think that's a great idea. So when we send out the application next week, it will be targeted to them as well. It also gives an opportunity for us to hear about operational differences between those portfolios and NYCHA, and allow for some really good conversation around what's working in different ways. So thank you for that suggestion as well.
Okay.
Okay, so as I mentioned, the plan has key organizational changes, and this really is about how the board and the executive structure work. So we're looking to create new board committees or revamp board committees that maybe haven't been active in a while, and looking to really engage this board more directly in some of the policy work that's going on at NYCHA. The transformation plan does have a long-term strategy of separating out the chair and CEO positions. That obviously requires state legislation, so it was on the longer-term list. And then for the executive leadership, it lays out more of a standard, what we call C-suite executive structure, to more streamline functions within NYCHA under different management structures. And on the next slide, I think we show the functional organizational chart that aligns to. So this just shows a more streamlined alignment of NYCHA's functions underneath key executives, and that this would require some bylaw changes that we'll be talking about soon, and that this would, help NYCHA have a stronger sense of accountability and a stronger set to move forward on all these strategies. So with that, I will hand it off to Arvind to take us through the rest of the presentation.
Eva?
Yes, Mr. Adams.
I have a question. Two questions. The first one is, in the recent news press release regarding residents will now have more engagement in their RAD management decisions and possibly even not going, maybe changing the RAD management based on how they feel. How will that affect RAD going forward? Will it stumble? Will it be delayed? And my second question is, if the average, when the residents roundtable sees this information and they were to ask the changes at the top, the changes in management, how would that affect them on a day-to-day basis? How would that be explained if they don't understand what they're looking at? I mean, for the most part.
Sure. I'm going to take the second question, and then on your first question regarding RAD, I'll see if Jonathan Gavaya is able to chime in and explain more about that new process for resident engagement on RAD and PAC. But in your second question about how does a resident, how will a resident feel impact about this? It really comes down to that accountability piece that I referenced. In this organizational management. We'll be drilling down into, as you know, new neighborhoods. So we've gone from 21 regions to 30 neighborhoods underneath operations. And again, it's really about redesigning all of our strategies at the actual property. So with 30 neighborhoods, we have 4 vice presidents underneath the general manager, really looking at the properties on a day-to-day basis and hoping to, have quicker response to conditions, being able to mobilize resources as needed. So we're hoping that that's how the residents are going to feel see an initial change, is just having more eyes on the ground as to what's going on and being able to facilitate quicker responses. Chair, I don't know if you want to add anything else into that before we hand it over to Jonathan.
No, Eva, please go ahead, and Jonathan can talk to the RAD. And Joe, there's no plans to delay the RAD. We are making adjustments to what I would call the front end to make the transition more, make the transition easier. We're also getting feedback from other parties who've been participating in these conversions and recommending to us improvements, transactional improvements, including how to better engage site staff and residents. So this is going to continue to, I hope, evolve and strengthen. And I'll let Jonathan pick up on where we are with, because in addition to whatever you might have read, we've also issued a pretty interesting RFP based on the Fulton Working Group and that kind of thing. I believe Jonathan's on the call.
Yes, I am. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Jonathan, if I may, before you begin, I just have a question on the org chart. The chart that's before us right now, before we change it. So I've looked it over quite a few times and wonder, those are the major portions of it. And then maybe there's another chart that will break down what departments or what committees fall under what heading. Because I do not see audit or finance.
So this does not show the board committees underneath the board of directors. This shows the NYCHA executive structure and major functions underneath each of those executive functions. It does not show the board committees that we've proposed yet.
Okay. I'm good.
Okay, Jonathan?
Great. Thank you. So with respect to procurement and resident involvement, one of the things that we're really excited about is, and you may have read it with respect to Fulton about a week ago, we are going to be including residents in the developer selection process. So the RFP for Fulton has not been released yet, but we expect to do that in the coming weeks. Residents will be very much part of the developer selection and proposal review process. And it's also a process that we're going to be implementing for our PACT Round 9 process, which is already underway. We received proposals a couple of weeks ago, And we expect to, we're starting with these two projects, but we will be going forward on this basis with all of the remainder of the PAC projects for the foreseeable future.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Board Member Adams. I think I've heard this, and how the residents were going to just be involved in this process from the beginning. So I think the question I have to reform it is, why do the courts have to become involved to maybe put a stamp on this happening? And I'm just wondering why, if this was always, or I believe I've been hearing that this is going to be done in the process, but why did they have to become involved, the courts?
Joe, I'm sorry, it's Greg. So let's separate out what Jonathan's talking about is a different from what you saw with the Baez consent decree decision.
Okay.
What the judge in that case is saying is that basically from the time the original decree was agreed to, NYCHA's real estate portfolio is changing. So what he wanted both the plaintiffs and NYCHA to do was to negotiate new terms. And those terms would make sure that we come to agreement on the mold requirements under Baez, and that is if it's a RAD site, that there's no diminishment of NYCHA's commitment prior to closing. And then in addition to that, after closing, we have been working very diligently with the RAD development team and others to make sure that compliance is achieved. Things like open work orders are closed and that kind of thing. But so he's sort of saying, you two need to get together and sort of update the consent decree based on what's happening now. That doesn't necessarily impact RAD in the way that Jonathan's describing, if that's helpful.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood it. I thought maybe that it was that the RAD management were not favorable to the tenant. Maybe I got it confused. I'm sorry, Greg. Maybe I got it misunderstood.
No, it's okay. These are very complicated issues because we have compliance obligations, and of course, we want to provide a unit, whether it's under RAD or public housing or blueprint, whatever. We want to provide units and apartments that are mold free. So the two, to me, they kind of layer on top of each other.
Okay.
We have a RAD process that's going to be more engaging and is going to give, to Jonathan's comments, I think a real opportunity for residents to see who's coming on board. And that introduction will take place in the procurement process as opposed to maybe post-procurement.
Okay.
And then the second part of that is we have to renegotiate with the plaintiffs how we're going to do Baez and how we're going to do that in light of the changes in the portfolio.
Okay, understood. All right.
Great.
Arvin, why don't you take it from here?
Perfect. Thanks, Eva. Hey, everyone. Arvin Sahoni, Senior Director, Strategic Planning at NYCHA. I want to talk through a couple specific changes that we're planning to make as part of this plan. So two final ones on the organizational side. One, the neighborhood model. So you may have heard about this before, moving our operation structure to neighborhoods. So instead of having what was before 6 different management boroughs, including the NGO 1 and mixed finance developments, moving those back into their natural geographies. So Rutgers houses in the Lower East Side is now part of Manhattan again. Bayview houses in Brooklyn, part of Brooklyn again. And then from there, creating 30 individual neighborhoods to really manage as much as we can at a local level. The point of this being, how can we actually create customized service for residents, custom to the needs of the developments and needs of the neighborhoods, and not a one size fits all. I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit. Secondly, central office functions. How do we then take our central office staff and move them closer to the point of delivery, closer to the developments, closer to the property staff, and the on-the-ground conditions? So we're moving portions of our HR team, budget, IT, procurement, and others away from downtown Manhattan and into the borough offices, where these people's jobs are going to be to actually support the developments directly. So for HR, filling vacancies quickly, for budget, helping property-based budgeting with property managers, IT and procurement supporting as well. The goal of this being, we want our entire staff obviously to understand day-to-day reality on the ground, but also to have these people in place to support developments as closely as possible to get things done faster and in a more nimble fashion. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah,
question on that part of it.
Please.
Will this be not too many cooks in the kitchen scenario where some of our property managements are getting they're getting a grasp on day-to-day operations and getting things done? So by having more people from downtown move closer or in the kitchen with them cooking up the same recipes for improvements, that won't be a problem, will it? Because, you know, so we are human beings and people sometimes get in each other's way and it slows down things instead of expediting them. That does happen. I'm just asking.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. I was going to try and carry that analogy through and say that the chef is probably actually the property manager in that case. With these folks are all supporting, right? So the property manager is still the person in charge at the development. This team is there to provide specific expertise on their function. So if it's human resources, finance, whatever, but they're not going to be in charge of the property manager. There's still a separate operations function that will do that. You're raising an important question though, because part of getting this right is making that very explicit to everyone what their job is, to say, here's where your role starts and ends and how it works with everyone else. Because none of this is going to work unless everyone actually understands their role and is playing the role effectively. So it's a really good point about getting this right.
Oh, okay.
So Arvin, let me be clear. So we're going back to an old model that we once had where the management manages their own, shall we say, development. And the only time that they would go above or laterally is when they're having a problem getting something that would help them complete anything that needs to be done at the development. In essence, what I'm saying is the final decision would be at the site and not at 90 Church or 250 Broadway or the CCC. It would be at the local level.
Yes, that's absolutely right. So the goal is to move as many decisions as possible to the local level. There are some that probably can't quite go there. There are some that require compliance and some centrality to it. But whatever we can move to the local level, we want to move there. So for example, questions around setting a property budget. We want the property manager with the resident association leader to set that together instead of saying, here it is from 90 Church. And so I think those kinds of things we want to be done locally with kind of the oversight in place and the training in place to do it well. But yes, you're absolutely right. That's the goal of this. And it is kind of like the old model. It is a little bit like what we used to do.
Well, that's the way it used to be many years ago.
Yes. All right, let's go to the
been around for a while.
So I'm going to go through a couple of our priority projects as part of this this plan. I'll go through them kind of quickly. If there's sort of one you want to stop on, just let me know and we can get into more detail on any of them as we go. First, work order reform. This is obviously the thing we heard a lot about in our engagement sessions. The challenges with putting in a work ticket. It gets closed out without any work being done. It gets, routed to 15 different people. It takes 6 months to get this finally closed. So we had a pilot running in Western Queens at the end of last year, start of this year, moving the skilled trades, most high volume skilled trades to this neighborhood level. So Queensbridge, North South, Astoria, Ravenswood had the trades moved to just those 4 sites. And then had a sort of a different way of thinking about the work too. Instead of individual trades thinking about their portion of the work, how do we as an agency think about the entire job? So this peeling paint on the wall requires maybe paint, plaster, maybe there's a carpenter needed for a cabinet. How do we think through all that together and then schedule these trades in a sequence, get the work done faster for a resident with less visits to the resident's apartment? So right now, that pilot had good results. We want to now plan the scale up of that to the rest of the developments, with the goal of being sort of Q3 for the first borough, and then sort of each quarter will have an additional rollout as we go. Related to that, there's a second piece of work around closing work tickets. As I mentioned, a lot of resident frustration on, I put in a ticket, it gets closed, nothing was done. I put in a heat complaint, got closed, nothing was done. So taking a look at those protocols for what it takes to actually close a work order. What do we actually have to do or have a worker do before that can get done? And what does a resident have to know before we can actually sign off on anything being closed? On caretaker schedules, we also heard a lot in the engagements around frustration with cleanliness on the grounds and in buildings. How do we make sure we have the schedules in place to really provide effective service with whatever we need in terms of weekend coverage and after hour coverage, but in a way that's not leaving properties dirty at the end of the week. Property-based budgeting, I mentioned a little bit before. How do we give property managers in partnership with resident associations more control over the budget to say, here's what we needed to manage this specific site versus kind of a one size fits all. For annual recertification, we had an effort going on with the city's service design studio to reform that process, to make it simpler, to make it more user-friendly, senior-friendly. We've gotten very good feedback early on with our resident testers on this one, that it's been easier. I've had a couple RA presidents saying, in trying to help other residents with this process, they found it much simpler to use. So the rollout of that's going to be a big piece of this plan as well. New organizational performance indicators. How do we measure performance at NYCHA? How do we think about the way we track compliance towards obligations? How do we track how someone's doing, how the agency is doing against specific goals in this plan and other places? And then lastly on this page, lease enforcement. We've also heard a lot about lease enforcement from the resident side saying, my neighbor's doing X, Y, Z. Why isn't the agency enforcing those rules? And so how do we think about the administrative burden on development staff, which right now is taking a lot from the housing assistants to manage that process? Then how do we also make sure it's enforced consistently across developments, which we've heard it's not always the case right now?
Okay, so Adams.
Sure.
Hello. I have some personal experience with some of these. Our property manager does now have access to actually getting the skilled trades people here a little bit more timely, like brick mason and plumbers for right now. It doesn't seem to be such a burden on them to wait for someone downtown or wherever, or the borough office to send some signal or check or something. So that seems to be a little has gotten a little better, as far as getting people here without waiting for a long and response. The work ticket thing, the only part of that I can relate to as far as some other residents is when we were able to actually get our appointments as when we called in was very helpful. It seems like management is struggling with that. Trying to get the appointments. They sent messages, say, please be patient, but that doesn't seem to be working too well. I think it seemed to be more time. The residents make their own appointments. They'll know when they'll be home. And that seems to be a struggle. What part of this, the recertification process. That has been 3 times fold better. I told the board that I took my paperwork on Wednesday. I went home 2 hours later. I got a email saying my recertification information was being processed. That Friday, I got a robocall stating what my new rent would be and when it started. Those portals cannot be used. There's no privacy. that you can't go back and forth when you're trying to enter information. They're a dinosaur. They should not be used. This is just my opinion.
Yep.
Whatever these property managers did, and they did this, it was 3 days. It took 3 days to get my new rent processed, get my amount sent to me. Those portals sitting out in the open area are just not feasible to use, in my opinion. They're just not feasible.
Yeah.
And the rest of this, I don't really have a lot of, I'm not going to comment on the rest of it, but those 3 things seem to be very familiar with. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Chair, you have your hand raised?
I do. I just wanted to thank you. I just wanted to amplify what Arvind has put on this page, because I really think if I'm picking a slide out of the whole presentation, here is the place where we're talking about how are we doing the work at the property level, and how do our business systems support that work. And I think Commissioner Adams and others really understand that we have to rebalance. That's one of the reasons we're moving folks closer to the properties, is to support that work. And this is going to require a lot of training. I mean, I don't want to give the impression that we're suddenly going to be able to turn everyone into a property-based budget expert. But it's going to require staff development. And I think that's important to emphasize. This is about keeping some existing skills and maybe learning new ones. And the last thing I'll say, to be very clear, each one of these initiatives, and if I'll focus on the AWS, for example, when we structure that, we're going to be able to come back with a true maintenance profile or janitorial profile for every building over time. So that there'll be schedules, there'll be standards. That's the other part. And then we'll be able to look at the work against that standards and begin to understand and create a structure of accountability. So this is really, I realize these changes, I don't know how you say it exactly. Sometimes because we are so big, we don't understand that everything we do doesn't matter how big we are. It doesn't matter how many people we employ. It doesn't matter the size of our budget. If you can't see it at the property, you can't see it. So that's the driver for these changes, is to get to that level and get to that kind of reform, because each property that advances under this model will have a different approach and outlook. And that includes the property manager having a real clear picture of his or her ability to bring resources and having a strong relationship with the tenant association. So I think, as much as I love all the other work that's been done, this is the place where we can begin to see the change, I think, that everyone's been demanding from us.
Well, Greg, 3 of these things seem to be working at a high speed result. The AWS, I don't want to comment on too much, because there seems just to be a lot of venting with some of the employees, so it wouldn't be fair to evaluate it like that, because they feel that it's a labor management agreed thing in the contract, but they feel that when other people don't come to work, that it causes them a lot of extra work to be out there 6 a.m. by themselves. So I don't know the ins and outs of all of that, or the AWS, but the other 3 aspects that I spoke about, they seem to be on the highway to doing a lot better. That's what I can say.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Arvind.
Yep.
There is something that I wish you would consider looking into.
Sure.
There is an erroneous common practice currently at all the developments. And that practice is a repair falls under the cracks, right? So 6 months have come by and the repair has not been completed. the resident finally reaches someone and now they want to take action. Here's the erroneous part of it. After 6 months, now, once they get it, the management, the development manager gets this complaint from up above and now begins to treat it like it's a new one.
Mm-hmm.
And then they start rehashing everything all over again to the frustration of the resident.
Sure.
I believe that if you've been going through a problem for something for 6 months, okay, and you finally reach somebody that wants to do something about it, that you should take on from the process that it left and not say, okay, like one example, you go 6 months. One of the processes of doing the repairs is when it's first reported, they send someone to go look at it to see what the extent and who it is and whatever else needs to be done. Now that's done and it's supposed to go to the individual skilled trades, okay? So now the skilled trades turns around and goes over and says, then lo and behold, they found out that now not only a plasterer, you need a mason. Okay, so now in that process, waiting to get those people there, it's 6 months have gone by and we're still waiting on the repair to be done. Yep. Now the person reaches, let's say the chair, and the chair calls in and says, hey, there's this problem. I mean, somebody look into it. And what do? They treat it as a new repair. And yep. Then they include it with the work, for example, that's being bundled in. That is very unfair to the resident.
Yeah,
it shouldn't be that way. That's a common practice.
Yeah, it's a fair point, Mr. Gonzalez. I think two things I'd say. One, I think you're right about that. I think what you're describing is exactly what we're trying to attack in that very first bucket. So the work order reform is designed, obviously, if you catch something late to address it right away, but to hopefully never have things get to that point to begin with. So instead of having each trade sort of wait to get their shot at this, if you can train the first person that sees the issue, if it's a maintenance worker, to say, I know what it takes to get this done. It's going to take these 3 trades. Here are the dates that are going to come in order. So you have everything waiting for you. You don't have to sort of wait and anticipate when it's going to happen.
Exactly.
That's exactly the goal of that first program.
Yeah. And one of the other things is that in doing that process, long ago, I don't know if this is included in this one, but, and you kind of touched on it when you said that you're improving the skilled trades at the local levels and everything else, is, they can multitask. Sometimes the apartment that has 5 repairs, they won't interfere with having 3 skilled laborers in there doing the work because it's in different rooms.
Sure.
And that's another something that you should look at in this first part, so that if a resident, needs these repairs, out of the 5, you can do 3 in one day.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Absolutely. And I'm on. But hello.
Yep. Go for it, Mr. Rim.
Another example is that I had a trade skill situation, and our superintendent actually went and purchased a couple $100 of items. So when the plumbers arrived, they would have the stuff to use. Everything was moving along except the communication issue to let me know and the other person know that's connected to me when they were coming. Now, mind you, your ground people had the stuff on the table. The people were on their way, but nobody told us when they were coming.
Yeah.
She was home, I wasn't, so the job couldn't be completed. So I think communication is a big issue as far as, and that goes back to my, first concern is letting the residents make the appointment, get that robocall, and so they can be home on that date.
Yep.
That has been taken away.
Yep. Yeah. And so that's also sort of part of this first bucket is if you have the planner all of a sudden at a more local level at a neighborhood And then all of a sudden, between the planner, the tradesperson, the maintenance worker, and the superintendent, everyone kind of knows what's going on with the resident in the middle of that. And so it's absolutely the goal is to get to that point where we can actually avoid that issue. The last thing I just want to say quickly on this page is I think it's important to note just the way the agency is working on these things too. I think if you remember back to the monitor's consultants report, one of the things that we got really hit on was the siloed nature of the agency. And so all of these different strategies and teams here are truly cross-functional. We have members from every part of this agency working on it. So for example, for the annual certifications, you've got sort of the IT team leading that piece of it, in partnership with leased housing, with public housing tenancy administration, having these teams together with obviously the finance and HR and whoever else needs to be in the room to get it done. It's really sort of been a powerful way of us working together. I think it's sort of addressed that very specific criticism that we got in that 2019 report. So let's go to the next slide. We've got many more strategies.
And before you continue, Paula, your hand is raised.
Oh, please.
Thanks so much. Let me make sure I'm unmuted. Thank you. This is sort of a general comment, and I want to say it kind of from the heart. I've had a lot of experience over the years in organizing and being at the ground level with people. And I am just so excited about this neighborhood model. But I would say that this person who's going to be the neighborhood administrator is going to need an incredible set of skills to build trust, working with both the resident associations, but also just general communications improvements. And I just want to both celebrate the idea, but recognize how building trust is so critical to this. And it's more of a statement than a question, because I feel deeply that this is so important and such great progress, but it all sort of centers on building trust in the long run.
Yeah, well, I think that's absolutely right. I think that's sort of one of the next steps on that is us thinking through and sort of formalizing what is the required meeting cadence, for example, for a neighborhood administrator. How often do they have to be meeting with a resident leader or their property managers or whoever else in the neighborhood? What does that look like? How does that work together to actually make this model work? It's a huge part of getting this right. I think you're absolutely correct.
Yeah. Well, thanks for everyone for listening. It's just such a key part of this. Thank you.
Of course.
Great. Paula, can you unraise your hand so I know if you raise it again?
All right, let's go to slide
Thank you.
12 then. So again, sorry for the long list of things, but they're all good things that we're working on. So, Eva mentioned the governance structure, and this list, just for reference, these are more internal pieces. I think that first list is very resident focused. We're actually going to have residents on those working teams as we go. This list is more internally focused, but I think also very important to building the backbone of the agency. So Eva mentioned the governance structure. How do we think about the executive level, other departments to make this place more efficient and effective? The neighborhood model, which we actually may move from this list to the first list because there are a lot of questions around resident input on the neighborhood model. We want residents to say to us, here's how often I'd want to meet with my property manager or neighborhood administrator, or here's how I would want this to work. So this may actually shift to the first list over time. For borough administration teams, we mentioned this a little bit before. Again, so not, moving central office staff from headquarters now into the borough office. So you wouldn't have these staff members at a development because it's not necessarily, you don't need an HR person at each development. But having them at a borough level, so at least one step closer to a development to make sure they're serving development needs directly. AWS for maintenance workers has still sort of been in the works for a while. At the moment, still on hold. How do you think through extended hour coverage for the maintenance side? There's a quality assurance project management office, which is helping us on the operations side to think through how do we execute on a lot of these things across the board. Human capital management for HR. How do we implement that system? I think that RFP has actually gone out now to provide HR staff with more sort of easy access to information to make their processes more efficient and effective. Learning management system, obviously training is a big part of this entire program. How do we make sure that our staff is trained to do the job well and to develop in their careers? Part of that is this learning management system. How do we provide not just training, but also sort of self-selected content to really make sure our staff is ready to go to get these things done. On procurement and vendor management, we heard a lot, from the outside and from internally, the challenges with procurement and, our perception in the market. We have a new chief procurement officer who's been in place for a few months now, who's done a wonderful job in making some changes there. And obviously a lot more work to be done on how do we ensure that we have the best partners from the outside helping us get this work done too. And then lastly, data governance. How do we think through the way that the agency uses data to make decisions? We produce a lot of data, we have a lot of data, but how do we actually use it in different parts of the agency to make the best decisions for residents or with residents? Let's go to the next slide.
Oh, wait.
Oh, sorry.
I was raising my hand, but
Please.
Speaking of internal project teams.
Yep.
Another a concern, and I'd like to know the status of what it is today. I hear a lot of complaints about residents not being able to have accessibility to their manager.
Mm-hmm.
In essence, so there's questions either of repair or paperwork or any given issue, and the staff, including the assistant manager, is not either giving a proper answer or giving an erroneous one, or is not actually answering the question as is, and the person wants to speak to the manager. Unfortunately, in many of the places, they don't have access to their management. Now, I remember there was a time when managers used to set a day aside to deal with their residents. That's not happening in certain developments. So what is the current status these days of the accessibility of a resident to their manager?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, Mr. Gonzalez. I think, as you said, it's highly variable right now by development. I think we've heard that too at certain places.
Oh, yeah.
So part of what we're trying to design here, I'm going to get into some of the culture of service stuff at the end, is what is the expectation of every property manager going forward? And obviously the last year has been additionally challenging given the COVID restrictions on the property management office and all that. But in sort of a world afterwards, what are the expectations of that role? Is it a day set aside? Is it a certain hour set aside? What does it look like to have a resident go from, an HA to an assistant property manager to a property manager? If they still can't get it done, how do they get to the neighborhood administrator if they need to? So part of the neighborhood model next step is all of that web of communication between the residents and all those different pieces, because we want to always give the resident another outlet if they need it. To never feel like they're stuck. And I think that's happening a lot where residents feel like they're stuck because they can't,
Absolutely.
There's nowhere to go for an answer. And that's the last thing we want, I think. And that's what this is designed to address. So right now, I think it's different everywhere. So I can't give you a clear answer as to the status of it, but this is very much designed to address it.
Yeah. One of my pet peeves has always been that anything that's done in Brooklyn has to be the same in Manhattan, has to be the same in Staten Island. It has to be uniformed.
Mm-hmm.
So that, the resident here in Manhattan calls his cousin in Brooklyn and say, I had this issue, and oh no, that's not the way they do it here. And that should not be. Most of these things can be uniformed, and then there are going to be exceptions. I get that. But for the most part, I think it should be a uniform process.
Yeah. And it's a good point that you're raising here. I think on the neighborhood model, it's the other side of it, right? So the neighborhood model is designed to provide to the custom needs of a development, but not custom standards, right? The standards have to be consistent across the entire agency.
Correct.
So we can serve specific needs at a certain site, but the standards have to be the same because we do move people between sites. And so
exactly.
I think you're absolutely right. That has to be consistent.
Okay.
Ahmad?
Yep. Go for it, Mr. Adams.
The AWS maintenance will allow residents to schedule repair appointments Right now, what they're doing, my development, a couple of developments, they're doing these things called Saturday blitzes.
Mm-hmm.
And they're coming in teams with tickets from months ago. They do make a notification. They're playing catch up. They explain that to us. Do you have a time frame when this part would be implemented where we can actually schedule a repair appointment on a evenings on Saturday or something like that?
Yes.
And then the next question is, can you elaborate more on the redesign of the procurement and vendor management process?
Sure.
After the first one, thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So on the first one, so that is still in negotiation with the Teamsters with 237.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a specific date as to when that's going to be implemented.
Okay.
But I think, you mentioned the weekend blitzes. I know sort of a similar philosophy behind NYCHA cares and some of the work order task force stuff in the past has been very effective. But right now this is still in negotiation with the union. So there's no definitive date as to when this would be rolled out. On the second question around procurement, so our new chief procurement officer, Sergio, has sort of been overseeing a lot of these changes. They're very specific around, internal processes. So the way that a development staff or central office requests goods and services, that process, how do we manage our vendors? How do we manage contracts? How do we let a department know, hey, this contract is expiring soon? Make sure you renew it or have someone else in place to pick up the work. The goal of this entire thing is to obviously make it more efficient internally, but also to make sure that we're attracting kind of, the best service providers from the outside world. We hear sort of the complaints around vendor work sometimes. And so we want to make sure that we are attracting these people by having the best kind of business process in place so that we're not difficult to deal with and that's not scaring people away like it's been, I think, for a while.
Okay.
Perfect. Let's go on to the next slide. I think this is the last of the list of project teams. So just three more on the internal side. NYCHA Stats. So this is a monthly meeting that brings together executive staff to review usually specific performance of a borough, neighborhood, a development. It could be a department like elevators or heating. And so this is modeled after the NYPD's CompStat system. And the goal is to actually take this from obviously a monthly meeting at the executive level, but also have the borough vice presidents, the neighborhood administrators use the same set of data and metrics in their meetings with property managers too, to have it all build up in the same way. So everyone's looking at the same things all the way up and down the organization. For asset information strategy, how do we think through the way we manage assets? And so the way we think about all the building inventory, the way we think about 3D mapping, how do we make sure we have a hold on all the different things that NYCHA owns and operates, and so that we can actually make better investment decisions, make better operational decisions. So it's a really kind of an underlying piece of a lot of the things that we're talking about here. And similarly, the second part of that is just the system itself, whether it's 3D modeling, the building information systems, mapping software. How do we really, again, make sure, given just the enormous number of assets that we do own and operate, how do we make sure that we have a hold on them and that we're making sure that we know everything we need to know about them to maintain them properly? And then just two that are very specific on sort of really resident focused. On 964, this comes up a lot. This comes up every week with the CCOP members. A new memorandum of understanding with CCOP, which will affect all resident leaders on what are NYCHA's obligations to them, what are their sort of rights and responsibilities as resident leaders under 964. And then secondly, I think even mentioned the resident roundtable. This roundtable is going to have, I think it's probably 32 members now if we include the couple of folks from the PACT sites too, to get specific feedback on questions that we have, policy questions around maybe lease enforcement or safety and security, but to also have these residents serving on all of these working teams that I just described. We really want to formalize the resident feedback process to get as many voices as we can into all of the transformation plan project groups.
Arvin,
Yep.
just one statement.
Sure.
That blades cuts both ways.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Just
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Armand Adams.
Yep.
Won't the first three things, won't we need more bodies, funding to make these three things so when they evaluate it to possibly run as smoothly as possible? I do know that the agency did receive some money under the stimulus. I believe that number was $250 million. I'm not sure how much that will go to getting more people or more equipment to make some of these things move along. But wouldn't that be required to have the bodies, equipment, and funding to make these three top things be evaluated?
So, Mr. I'll confirm this and make sure I get you a definitive answer on this. I believe so far on the bodies question that in terms of staff needs, I think everything that we need for these three is actually in the FY21 budget. So those are actually all accounted for. A couple things in the second two buckets, so for the asset information pieces, may end up being FY22 and beyond. And so they may have some of the software things may require additional funding. But for right now, I believe all three of these pieces on the sort of hiring side are all covered by the budget. But I'll make sure I get you a specific answer and make sure.
All right, thank you.
All right, let's go to the next slide here. So I think you may have seen this before, maybe last time Eva and I were here. We wanted to take a new mission statement as part of this plan and new values for the agency. And again, this was done with a lot of input from the engagement sessions from residents, from staff, and others. So the new mission is to provide quality housing for New Yorkers that is sustainable, inclusive, and safe, while fostering opportunities for economic mobility. And those two pieces are both important here. That's always kind of been the agency's dual mission. Obviously, housing first as a big piece of it, but also connecting residents to opportunity has always kind of been a really important part, starting with the public housing law way back in the 30s. So I wanted to reflect both of those things in this mission. And then quickly on the values, I'm going to talk more about this in the last two slides. Culture of service, how do we make sure we've got true customer service with residents? Breaking down silos, I mentioned, how do we think about working across departments with each other to get things done? A partnership with residents, really having residents involved in each part of the agency's operations and decision-making, using data to make those decisions as well. Like I said, becoming a better partner. This sort of includes the procurement changes that I talked about, some of the work with CBOs in the neighborhoods. How do we sort of put a better external face and better external working relationships with our partners? And then empowering our staff. How do we make sure that we are really empowering all the talent of this agency to do the best job possible and to feel fulfilled in their jobs is a really important part of this work too. Let's go to the next slide. And so, with all of the things that I mentioned, all these changes, we want you to imagine what an employee-empowered, customer-centric agency could look like. When we visit developments, we see residents asking for, livable homes. We see staff that's working very hard by and large to do a very good job. And the question for us is, how do we put the staff in a spot to do that job effectively? How do we create a system that allows them to do their job effectively every single day? So if you look at this slide, the top left here is a word cloud of things that we had heard from, I believe from the Employee Engagement Committee. So you see words like overworked, unempathetic, unstable, unreliable, sort of really challenging things to hear that the staff feel about the agency and sort of the current state of the culture here. If you ever click on a Yelp review of NYCHA or development, you'll see kind of a similar 1 or 2 stars in the reviews. And so the goal of empowering the staff and the culture of service, these two values that are in this plan, the goal is to address these things and really to create an agency that works together, that improves morale, that has people sort of working at their best, all in pursuit of customer satisfaction, of making sure the residents are getting the service they deserve here. Because that ultimately is the end measure of success for this agency, is making sure that residents are getting what they need to have these livable, safe homes. And so that, I think I want to leave sort of with this, imagine what this could look like. And again, all the things that we talked about today are all driving towards this future for the agency. This is what we want to be reality over the course of this plan. Let's go to the next, I think the last slide also. In terms of just next steps for where we're going with this, we have this current implementation analysis phase through September. We owe a implementation plan to our federal partners in September of this year, with a second phase of that in June of 2022. And so all of these working groups are sort of working towards these dates as well to have things deliverable for those two phases. So I think with that, we'll take any further questions, comments, reactions. We're open to anything.
Well, let me just start off with the way it's explained and the goals that this plan is trying to implement. I think it's a wonderful thing because it's moving towards a positive future. I know that it's a massive undertaking, and it will meet its challenges. It will run into some challenges, but I see that a lot of the normal things that would cause a problem in the past now seems to have at least some form of viable solution that can be accepted. It's not the thought of, oh, here we go again. No, the culture is changing to, this is important, let's fix it. And that to me is a good thing to see, providing that it goes as we're planning that it go. So I'm real good with this, and hope and pray that all the people that are partaking in this, and I'm not just talking about from the chair down to the caretaker. I hope that they all get in on the plan and want to work at it to be, using a military popular saying, to be all that it can be. So good luck. I hope to be around to help make those changes as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Ahmad, just to elaborate on what previous board members say, you're going to need someone with very good social skills and to make this decision making out there to get this done. And we're human beings. There's sometimes preconditioned behavioral patterns that do not serve us well to make decisions when we're trying to do something. So that will be up to the agency to try to get the best possible people in these places,
yep,
along with the money and the funding to assist in what you're trying to do here. I see little blades of green grass, and I see some thorny roses too as well. So you'll just have to be a good gardener and get this going. That's the best I can say it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Arvind and Eva. If no one has any further questions or comments on the transformation plan update, we'll move into our second report, which is a Section 3 overview, which will be co-presented by Esther Tomaszek-Hines, Lenice Vergara, and Christina Gencarelli. Esther?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Chair, General Manager, board members, my NYCHA colleagues, and members of the public. We're going to be talking to you today about some Section 3 overview and updates here at NYCHA and at HUD. I'd like to introduce my co-presenters, Christina Gencarelli from Vendor Integrity Supplier Diversity. and Lenice Vergara from Resident Economic Empowerment Sustainability, also known as REES. There will be a Q&A session at the end of this presentation. So we're going to get started by talking about the interim standard procedure. The Housing Authority in June of 2020 released an interim standard procedure on Section 3, which establishes processes for the New York City Housing Authority to ensure contractor compliance with Section 3 of the HUD Act. The interim standard procedure introduced other economic opportunities for professional service contracts. We trained over 700 NYCHA staff members on the interim SP in the months of August and September of 2020. And we are currently working on a final Section 3 SP, which is being developed to address projects and contracts for new construction rehab involving Section 8, the RAD and PACT conversions, as well as other economic opportunities to contribute to a Section 3 fund if contractors are unable to meet the Section 3 hiring or subcontracting requirements. And NYCHA would use these Section 3 funds for activities to increase Section 3 resident employment and to develop Section 3 business concerns. Some of the other areas that we are currently working to address are change orders, task orders, blanket purchase orders in excess of $250,000. We are increasing our efforts to award contracts to Section 3 business concerns with a priority for NYCHA resident-owned businesses, and to determine the appropriate penalties for a vendor's non-compliance. Next slide. So who is responsible for Section 3 at NYCHA? Although vendor integrity and supplier diversity and resident economic empowerment and sustainability are responsible for this area, it really takes a village, and everyone here at NYCHA is responsible to ensure that we are in compliance with Section 3. We rely on our partners in the admin departments who are monitoring vendor contracts to stay on top of the vendors and to ensure that they are doing everything that they are required to do under Section 3 to make sure that Section 3 residents are being hired appropriately. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the new Section 3 rule. In September of 2020, HUD published the Section 3 final rule, and that became effective November 30th, 2020. Under the new rule, the purpose of Section 3 is to ensure that economic opportunities, most importantly employment, generated by HUD funds is directed to low and very low income persons, and particularly those who are recipients of government assistance. What we included here was a link to the HUD Section 3 FAQs, and they are hot off the HUD presses. They were just released last week. So these are current HUD FAQ updates on the new rule. Next slide, please. So one of the big differences from the old Section 3 rule to the new Section 3 rule are the new numerical goals. Under the new Section 3 rules, a NYCHA contractor can demonstrate compliance with Section 3 in the following manner. So 25% or more of total labor hours worked by all workers employed under the contract have to be Section 3 workers. Of that 25%, 5% or more have to be worked by workers employed that are employed by PHAs or other recipients, and that is what's known as targeted Section 3 workers. Under the new rule, both of these goals must be met, and we'll talk a little bit more about the definition of the Section 3 worker and targeted Section 3 worker further on in the presentation. Next slide, please.
Section 3, hiring priorities. Section 3 residents should be hired in the following order of priority. Category 1 are residents of the public housing projects for which the public housing financial assistance is expended. Category 2 are residents of other public housing projects managed by the PHA that is providing assistance, or for residents of Section 8 assisted housing managed by the PHA. Category 3 are participants in youth builds programs, and Category 4 are low and very low income persons residing within the metropolitan area or non-metropolitan county in which the assistance is expended. And as Esther mentioned on the previous slide, a Section 3 worker is defined as a worker who is employed by a Section 3 business concern, or is a resident of public housing or Section 8 assisted housing, or is a youth builds participant. Section 3 business concerns. As defined in 24 CFR Part 75 of the Section 3 regulations, a Section 3 business concern is a business that is at least 51% owned and controlled by current public housing residents or residents who currently live in Section 8 assisted housing, or that is 51% or more owned and controlled by low or very low income persons, or over 75% of the labor hours performed for the business over the prior 3-month period are performed by Section 3 workers.
So this next slide provides you the view of the old rule and the new rule at a glance. And we really included the high-level changes in this slide. Some of the main components of the new rule is that the employment measurements and goal requirements from HUD is no longer based on new hires. Formerly, it was 30% of new hires, and currently it's based on labor hours worked. So 25% of the total labor hours worked by Section 3 workers, 5% of which have to be targeted Section 3 workers. The other main components of change from the old rule to the new rule is a reshuffling of the categories priorities. Before Section 8 residents were known as Category 4, they are now bumped up to Category 2 under public housing residents who are still Priority 1. The definition for Section 3 business concerns and reporting for Section 3 business concerns has changed. Currently, all employees for Section 3 business concerns can be counted towards the employment goals. And it's not 30% of your permanent staff, but 75% or more of the labor hours worked by Section 3 staff. HUD also got rid of the Section 3 business concern contracting goals. Traditionally, we were required to report under capital and operating funds how many contract awards we provided to Section 3 business concerns. Under the new rule that HUD has established, there is no longer a contracting goal requirement. And HUD also removed the Section 3 business concern procurement preference options, except for the alternative procurement for public housing residents, which we'll talk about a little bit more in other slides. And the covered contracts, they changed the definition. It doesn't apply to materials and supplies, Section 3. And they excluded professional service contracts where the work requires an advanced degree, and Section 8 projects that are outside of RED.
So we'll review the Section 3 hiring plan. The Section 3 hiring plan must be completed for all bids or proposals for Section 3 covered contracts in excess of $250,000. The Section 3 hiring plan is the contractor's plan for achieving the Section 3 numerical goals, and it includes the contractor's projected labor hours for their total workforce, their Section 3 workers, and their targeted Section 3 workers. It also includes a plan for recruiting Section 3 workers for employment and apprenticeship opportunities, and it includes an acknowledgement for the outreach and recruitment efforts for Section 3 business concerns for subcontracting opportunities. If a contractor does not project labor hours worked by Section 3 workers, or if they're unable to hire new employees, the Section 3 hiring plan must still be completed, and A is not an acceptable response on the form. The Section 3 hiring plan must be reviewed and approved by REIS prior to contract award, and a bidder may be deemed non-responsive or non-responsible if the Section 3 hiring plan is incomplete. Next slide. So we talked a little bit earlier about the Other Economic Opportunities plan. The Section 3 Other Economic Opportunities plan is for bidders for professional services contracts in excess of $250,000 if the bidder in its Section 3 hiring plan does not project hiring Section 3 workers or subcontracting to Section 3 business concerns. NYCHA originally had a definition for professional services, but HUD recently in the new rule updated this definition. So now a professional services means non-construction services that requires an advanced degree or professional licensing, including but not limited to contracts for legal services, financial services, accounting services, environmental assessment, architectural services, and civil engineering services. The definition we have on the screen here, it was NYCHA definition for professional services contracts. In its Section 3 OEO plan, the contractor must provide reasonable justification for its inability to hire Section 3 workers or to subcontract to a Section 3 business concern, and its need, therefore, to provide other economic opportunities. Plan must be completed in addition to the Section 3 hiring plan. So they do need to provide both a Section 3 hiring plan and an other economic opportunities plan. The contractor must select at least one option from the list of other economic opportunities options and fill out the sections completely based on their projections. Other economic opportunities can certainly include establishing training or pre-apprenticeship program or comprehensive paid internship programs for Section 3 workers. They can certainly hire Section 3 workers outside of their NYCHA Section 3 covered contract, or they can provide technical assistance to Section 3 business concerns, such as business development or management training to help establish, stabilize, or expand Section 3 business concerns. Contractors can utilize existing internships within their companies or training opportunities to help support and build out, help support Section 3 workers or business concerns, or they can certainly utilize REIS's support to build out a new program.
The Section 3 labor hour summary is a new form that was created to align with the new HUD rule. And contractors must submit the Section 3 labor hour summary with each payment request or invoice for contracts awarded after November 30th, 2020. For contracts awarded prior to November 30th, 2020, NYCHA will continue to track and monitor Section 3 hiring based on the prior HUD Section 3 rule. On the Section 3 labor hour summary, the contractor reports its actual progress in achieving the Section 3 benchmarks, lists all Section 3 workers and targeted Section 3 workers on the payroll, lists the total labor hours worked for all employees, Section 3 workers, and targeted Section 3 workers, and identifies the Section 3 business concerns awarded subcontracts. A Section 3 resident self-certification form must be submitted along with the Section 3 labor hour summary for each Category 4 hire. The self-certification includes the efforts made by the contractor to hire public housing residents and Section 8 residents, which are Category 1 and 2 residents, and the contractor's certification of those efforts. All labor hour information provided on the Section 3 labor hour summary must be cumulative and must be consistent with all EVFs submitted to REIS. The Section 3 Other Economic Opportunities Outcome Summary must be completed in lieu of the Section 3 Labor Hour Summary only if there is no commitment to hire Section 3 workers and/or subcontract with Section 3 business concerns for professional service contracts in excess of $250K. And as Lanice mentioned earlier, HUD changed the definition of professional services under the new rule. And the new definition is that professional services means non-construction services that require an advanced degree or professional licensing, including but not limited to contracts for legal services, financial consulting, accounting services, environmental assessment, architectural services, and civil engineering services. A professional services contractor must submit the OEO outcome summary with each payment request if the contractor's Section 3 OEO plan was approved by NYCHA's REIS department. On the OEO outcome summary, the contractor reports its actual quantifiable progress in achieving the other economic opportunity initiatives proposed in the contractor's approved Section 3 OEO plan. And again, this would include any training or pre-apprenticeship programs for residents and any other support that they may offer to Section 3 business concerns.
Excuse me, Christina. Paula, did you want to comment now, or are you going to wait for the comment at the end? You're muted.
I can wait.
Thank you.
Thanks. Please proceed, Christina. Sorry.
That's okay. Next slide, please.
So employer connections. So how does REIS work with NYCHA contractors, developers, and employer partners? It begins with the contractors having a new job opening and submitting a job order form. The contractor is expected to conduct their own outreach to recruit Section 3 workers, prioritizing outreach to NYCHA residents. REIS also helps recruit and refer NYCHA residents based on the employer criteria. REIS successfully sources candidates through, but not limited to, the graduates of the NYCHA Training Academy or other NYCHA partner providers. We identify appropriate candidates who have completed a skills assessment through REIS. We also utilize local and citywide outreach methods, such as organizing recruitment events or job fairs, other screening events. We post online as well. Qualified candidates are referred directly to the contractor or the employer for employment consideration. Within 1 week of referrals, REIS requires vendors to provide feedback on each referral. And if a Section 3 resident was hired, we do require an employment verification. Next slide.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about the Section 3 business concern outreach. The type of outreach that we do for the Section 3 business concerns is similar for the outreach initiatives we have for NYCHA's MWBE. Some of the things that are unique to Section 3 business concerns is that we have on the NYCHA external portal a NYCHA Section 3 business concern registry, and we update the businesses that are registered there on a monthly basis. Like the MWBEs, we invite NYCHA Section 3 business concerns to any MWBE trade shows or procurement events that NYCHA attends and that we host or that we participate in. We provide information to Section 3 business concerns at pre-bid conferences, and we encourage prime contractors to subcontract to eligible Section 3 business concerns. When we do procurement road shows, the procurement department trains the admin departments and educates them about Section 3 and Section 3 business concerns, referring them to the Section 3 business concern registry when making small and micro purchases. We work with our partners at SBS and make referrals for Section 3 business concerns to SBS to help them build their capacity, increase their contracting opportunities, not just with NYCHA, but with other New York City agencies as well. Next slide.
So now we're going to review the Section 3 contract compliance. NYCHA's vendor integrity and supplier diversity VIS department is responsible for monitoring contractor compliance with Section 3. A vendor must submit a completed Section 3 labor hour summary or OEO outcome summary with each payment request to the admin department. The admin department must review the Section 3 labor hour summaries or OEO outcome summaries for accuracy and completion before forwarding to VISD and REIS. VISD reviews the Section 3 labor hour summaries or OEO outcome summaries received from the admin department. Completed summaries are updated in the contract tracking system, an application used by VIS to monitor and track contractor Section 3 compliance. If incomplete or inaccurate, forms are returned to the admin department for correction. VIS tracks the contractor's compliance in meeting the Section 3 requirements based on the information provided in the Section 3 labor hour summaries or OEO outcome summaries. VIS tracks the contractor's Section 3 labor hour summaries and OEO outcome summaries throughout the duration of the contract. A contractor may be deemed non-compliant if they do not meet the Section 3 benchmarks. VIS will generate and submit biannual progress reports to the admin departments and REIS on vendor non-compliance for active contracts. Real estate development projects Section 3 compliance review currently falls outside of this standard compliance process. Section 3 non-compliance. VIS sends a non-compliance letter referred to as letter number 1 by certified mail or email to the contractor at 50% work completion with copies to REIS and the admin department. The vendor is expected to respond within 10 business days. VIS will send a follow-up non-compliance letter, letter number 2, by certified mail or email to the contractor if no response was received, with copies to REIS and the admin department. And again, the vendor is expected to respond within 10 business days. The admin department will schedule a corrective action meeting or conference call with the contractor within 30 calendar days and must provide VIS with a summary of the meeting and a copy of any documents provided by the contractor. Section 3 non-compliance may be taken into account during the admin department's contractor performance evaluations. VIS may report the contractor's non-compliance into Passcode, the New York City Mayor's Office of Contract Services online application used to determine the responsibility of contractors. Section 3 non-compliance can affect the contractor's ability to participate in future bids.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about the NYCHA project labor agreement. So NYCHA entered into a PLA with the Building Construction Trades Council and its affiliated unions. The PLA is currently operating on an extension. The PLA applies to NYCHA contractors on major capital repair projects such as construction and rehabilitation work. Contractors are still required to meet HUD Section 3 hiring goals. Some of the progress on the PLA includes getting more NYCHA residents into the union and building sustainable career pathways. Program participants gain access to union membership upon entry and attain journey level status upon graduation. Residents trained through the NYCHA Resident Training Academy receive pre-apprenticeship status. The PLA allows contractors to request qualified non-union residents, and the unions share out-of-work lists with NYCHA or NYCHA contractors so that NYCHA residents can be proactively identified for job openings. Next slide, please.
So what is REES? REES is an office under NYCHA's Community Engagement and Partnership Department. It stands for Resident Economic Empowerment and Sustainability. And at REES, we measurably support residents in increasing their income and assets through programs, policies, and collaborations in four main areas: employment and advancement, adult education and training, financial literacy and asset building, and resident business development. Next slide. So through a service coordination or zone model, REES connects working age NYCHA residents and Section 8 residents to opportunities and services to meet their goals through formal partnerships. To date, we have over 70 economic opportunities providers within 15 zones citywide, and each zone is managed by a dedicated REES zone coordinator. The zone model creates local partnership through economic opportunity service provider through a formal application process and service agreement. It connects residents to local economic opportunity service providers through the referral system and other methods. It makes sure that partners understand NYCHA's policies and procedures so they can better serve our residents. And it keeps track of lessons learned and NYCHA staff feedback to improve our work and services. Next slide. So under our adult education and training unit is the NYCHA Resident Training Academy. The Academy is a partnership between NYCHA, the Robin Hood Foundation, and some best-in-class training providers in New York City. We currently work and have worked with Brooklyn Workforce Innovations, BWI, and New York City College of Technology, City Tech, on some of our tracks under the NRTA. Administered by REES, the NRTA has offered training in construction, janitorial, pest control, maintenance, and painter's apprenticeship tracks. The NRTA construction class provides an 8-week pre-apprenticeship construction training. Residents receive key certifications, contextual math, and industry knowledge to help support careers in the construction trades. Effective as of 2015, the NRTA has been approved by the New York State Department of Labor as a direct entry provider. And currently we have direct entry partnerships with 9 different union trades, including local 3 electricians and the local 8 roofers. As of April of 2021, the NRTA has graduated over 2,800 NYCHA residents and has placed 90% of these graduates into employment with NYCHA or NYCHA vendors. And this year, 2021, we will be launching Hire NYCHA, which is a new job training initiative under NYCHA 2.0 to ensure that residents can connect to economic opportunities generated from our NYCHA real estate projects. Next slide. So diving in a little bit more into our apprenticeship opportunities. So as I stated before, as of 2015, the NRTA has been approved by the New York State Department of Labor as a direct entry provider. And since then, we've worked with various construction trades to establish relationships so that residents are not only accessing temporary construction jobs, but they are also connected to a construction career path that extends beyond just opportunities generated through NYCHA's contracting. Graduates from the NRTA pre-apprenticeship program have the option of direct entry into partnering unions. The 9 unions are DC 9 painters, the local 8 roofers, local 3 electricians, local 1 bricklayers and also plumbers, local 79 general laborers, 78 asbestos handlers, the carpenters union, and local 12 mechanical insulators. In 2017, NYCHA and SBS began an academic prep program to assist residents who are preparing for union entrance exams. In March of this year, 36 of our NYCHA residents actually passed the rigorous IBEW Local 3 aptitude exam. Next slide. So the Jobs Plus initiative, for those of you who don't know, the Jobs Plus is a proven place-based employment program designed to increase earnings and employment of working age residents in designated public housing developments or cluster of developments. Where implemented well, Jobs Plus resulted in about 16% increase in average annual earnings for working age public housing residents. Under Jobs Plus, services include employment-related services, financial incentive to make work pay, community support to work. In 2012, the City of New York invested $24 million to expand Jobs Plus from 2 sites to 9 sites citywide, extending services to nearly 25,000 working age residents. In 2017, Jobs Plus expanded to 27 NYCHA developments across 10 sites across New York City, which includes our Penn Wortman Jobs Plus funded program through a NYCHA grant awarded from HUD. As of March 2021, Jobs Plus has connected nearly 9,800 NYCHA residents with job placements since 2013. In September of 2019, the city released a request for proposal to add 3 new Jobs Plus sites and expand the reach to 7 existing sites. That will increase our reach to 44 developments citywide. Announcements are expected in July of this year. Next slide. Registering with REIS. So how do you register with REIS? NYCHA encourages, and we strongly encourage residents interested in employment and other economic opportunities to register their interest with REIS. REIS facilitates information session for candidate registration. Due to COVID-19, we have pivoted to offer virtual information sessions, and these are offered bi-weekly. During an information session, residents can obtain an overview of the Section 3 program and are connected to partner training programs. They are able to complete a one-on-one assessment and an intake to disclose information on their skill sets, their experience, licenses, certification. They're able to register their interest in future opportunities and leave a resume on file. Residents completing this process are queried from our database for any open opportunities and are referred for these vacancies based on the skill sets required of the position. Next slide. Residents can also connect to services through Opportunity Connect. Opportunity Connect is a new feature on the NYCHA self-service portal. Residents can create and manage their online profile, which will allow them to update their phone numbers. They can upload resume and certification. They can register their interest in Section 3. They can self-refer to any vetted REIS partners for services in financial education and counseling, employment assistance, business development, and more. They can also RSVP for these events directly online and receive reminder emails and more. Next slide.
So this slide shows, this slide is available on the NYCHA website. We update it annually. And this shows on the transparency report of the NYCHA portal, the vendor compliance monitoring for closed contracts. This is different than the annual report we provide to HUD, which is really a one-year snapshot. This is more of a comprehensive look at contracts from beginning to end. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk a little bit about next steps when it comes to Section 3. We're going to start with the last bullet. We are working on releasing the final Section 3 contractor compliance SP, and we hope to have that ready by third quarter in 2021. We are excited about the implementation of eComply software for monitoring vendor compliance. That's really going to help us That is some software that NYCHA procured for payroll, but also for Section 3 compliance. And we're really excited about this. This is going to really cut down on the manual data entry and help us really, monitor vendors' compliance and track it much more simply and much more easily. The company that was procured for this, eComply, is also an MWBE. We are also, after we release the final SP, of course, going to be providing training for the admin departments on the final Section 3 SP.
Esther,
Next,
can I interrupt you? Esther, may I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
I don't want to rush you, but I know that Member Gawalb has to leave at 4 p.m. So
Okay.
I just wanted to note for the
Yeah,
record that.
Yeah, we're almost to the end of time, so we could do maybe one question and then come back with others. So, yeah, I think we've got to spend more time on this.
Right. So, Member Gore, before you leave, do you have any questions you'd like to ask before you leave? I know you only have 3 more minutes.
No, I'll hold them. Thank you very much. And thank you
Okay.
for the presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Esther, proceed, please.
Okay.
Well,
so,
hang on. I'm sorry. It's almost, I have a conflict as well.
Oh,
So
sorry.
let's do Paula's question, and then we'll chat with staff and we'll come back so the board gets a chance to dig into this a little bit more.
Okay.
I'll take my question offline with Reese, no problem.
Okay.
Oh,
All
right.
Greg, I don't have a question. This was always a favorite entity of mine, Reese, long before I joined the board.
Okay.
We had a young man that came to BMCC and stated how it changed his life. I'm well aware of the Robin Hood Foundation and Local 3 with their workers and the home buying, I think, assistant program is in this also. It's an amazing process. And I do have a friend who's a vendor that says that they do come and check at his location, Local 3 standards, and make sure they're being paid and everything. That's it.
Thank you, Joe.
All right.
So we could take a few minutes to go ahead and just wrap up, but I just want to be mindful of the time. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks, Esther. Can you wrap it up in a
Sure.
minute or so?
I'm going to quickly finish off this slide, and this is the last slide. So what we're doing is we are, and this one's important, we're establishing Section 3 business concern preferences in Q2 of 2021. We're going to be updating the PPM to reflect those preferences. That's part of the alternative procurement policy, and that's really only for NYCHA resident-owned businesses. So we're really excited about that. We are also going to establish a certification process for Section 3 business concerns because we want to make sure that anybody who's receiving a preference or any workers that are being counted are legitimately Section 3 business concerns. HUD allows self-certification, but we want to take it to the next step and really require certification from our vendors. We're going to expand the business development support for a grant through the Fund for Public Housing from Goldman Sachs. And we already selected a vendor consultant who's an MWBE called Progress Playbook to design an outline for the NYCHA Business School. Reese is going to be expanding the resident training academy for pest control, janitorial, caretaker, P and construction training. The Hire NYCHA, which was announced in 2.0, is a program that expands the NRTA with the focus on real estate development portfolio. And I think that's it. And we're at time.
Thank you. Oh, am I on?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Being that all matters before the board today have been addressed, may I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Motion.
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Was that Adams?
Yes.
Was that Member Adams? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Thank you. The recorded end time is 4:01 p.m. The next NYCHA board meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, April 28, 2021 at 10 a.m. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.